好讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 讀到 Volume 2。咁上一回咧就結束咗 Part 1啦。作者就話因為揾唔到材料去繼續 Don Quixote 嘅事蹟，就將個故事告一段落。咁啊用佢哋嘅墓誌銘咧，算係一個收尾啦，又唔可以話草草嘅收尾，因為畢竟個故事都破場。故事最尾就係Don Quixote膊頭俾人打傷咗啦，佢自己都認為咧要翻鄉下休養啦。咁啊 Sancho 咧都好開心。咁我哋睇下呢一節咧 Don Quixote 療傷完畢之後咧點樣復出啊？不過喺復出之前咧都要睇一睇呢個作者嘅前言啊，對於個 Part 2嘅前言，睇下呢個作者咧有啲咩說話同讀者講。
Dedication of Volume 2 to the Count of Lemos. These days passed, when sending Your Excellency my plays that had appeared in print before being shown on the stage, I said, if I remember well, that Don Quixote was putting on his spurs to go and render homage to Your Excellency. Now I say that with his spurs he is on his way. Should he reach destination, methinks I shall have rendered some service to Your Excellency, as from many parts I am urged to send him off, so as to dispel the loathing and disgust caused by another Don Quixote who, under the name of second part, has run masquerading through the whole world, and he who has shown the greatest longing for him has been the great Emperor of China, who wrote me a letter in Chinese a month ago and sent it by a special courier. He asked me, or to be truthful, he begged me to send him Don Quixote, for he intended to found a college where the Spanish tongue would be taught, and it was his wish that the book to be read should be the history of Don Quixote. He also added that I should go and be the rector of this college. I asked the bearer if His Majesty had afforded a sum in aid of my travel expenses. He answered, no, not even in thought. Then, my brother, I replied, you can return to your China, post-haste, or at whatever haste you are bound to go, as I am not fit for so long a travel, and, besides being ill, am very much without money, while emperor for emperor and monarch for monarch, I have at Naples the great Count of Lemos, who, without so many petty titles of colleges and rectorships, sustains me, protects me, and does me more favour than I can wish for. Thus I gave him his leave, and I beg mine from you, offering Your Excellency the Trabajos de Persiles y Segismunda, a book I shall finish within 4 months, Dio volente, and which will be either the worst or the best that has been composed in our language, I mean of those intended for entertainment, and which I repent of having called it the worst, for in the opinion of friends it is bound to attain the summit of possible quality. May Your Excellency return in such health that is wished you. Persiles will be ready to kiss your hand, and I your feet, being as I am, Your Excellency's most humble servant. From Madrid, this last day of October of the year 1615, at the service of Your Excellency, Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. The author's preface. God bless me, gentle reader. How eagerly must thou be looking forward to this preface, expecting to find there retaliation, scolding, and abuse against the author of the second Don Quixote, I mean him who was, they say, begotten at Tordesillas and born at Tarragona. Well then, the truth is, I am not going to give thee that satisfaction, for though injuries stir up anger in humbler breasts, in mine the rule must admit of an exception. Thou wouldst have me call him ass, fool, and malapert, but I have no such intention. Let his offence be his punishment. With his bread let him eat it, and there's an end of it. What I cannot help taking amiss is that he charges me with being old and one-handed, as if it had been in my power to keep time from passing over me, or as if the loss of my hand had been brought about in some tavern, and not on the grandest occasion the past or present has seen, or the future can hope to see. If my wounds have no beauty to the beholder's eye, they are at least honourable in the estimation of those who know where they were received, for the soldier shows to greater advantage dead in battle than alive in flight. And so strongly is this my feeling, that if now it were proposed to perform an impossibility for me, I would rather have had my share in that mighty action than be free from my wounds this minute without having been present at it. Those the soldier shows on his face and breast are stars that direct others to the heaven of honor and ambition of merited praise. And moreover, it is to be observed that it is not with grey hairs that one writes, but with the understanding, and that commonly improves with years. I take it amiss too, that he calls me envious, and explains to me as if I were ignorant what envy is, for really and truly, of the two kinds there are, I only know that which is holy, noble, and high-minded. And if that be so, as it is, I am not likely to attack a priest, above all, if, in addition, he holds the rank of familiar of the holy office. And if he said what he did on account of him, on whose behalf it seems he spoke, he is entirely mistaken. For I worship the genius of that person, and admire his works and his unceasing and strenuous industry. After all, I am grateful to this gentleman, the author, for saying that my novels are more satirical than exemplary, but that they are good, for they could not be that unless there was a little of everything in them. I suspect thou wilt say that I am taking a very humble line, and keeping myself too much within the bounds of my moderation, from a feeling that additional suffering should not be inflicted upon a sufferer, and that what this gentleman has to endure must doubtless be very great, as he does not dare to come out into the open field in broad daylight, but hides his name and disguises his country as if he had been guilty of some less majesty. If perchance thou shouldst come to know him, tell him from me that I do not hold myself aggrieved, for I know well what the temptations of the devil are, and that one of the greatest is putting it into a man's head that he can write and print a book by which he will get as much fame as money, and as much money as fame. And to prove it, I will beg of you, in your own sprightly, pleasant way, to tell him this story. There was a madman in Seville who took to one of the drollest absurdities and vagaries that every madman in the world gave way to. It was this: he made a tube of reed sharp at one end, and catching a dog in the street, or wherever it might be, he with his foot held one of its legs fast, and with his hand lifted up the other, and as best he could fix the tube where, by blowing, he made the dog as round as a ball. Then, holding it in its position, he gave it a couple of slaps on the belly and let it go, saying to the bystanders, "Do your worships think now that it is an easy thing to blow up a dog? Does your worship think now that it is an easy thing to write a book?" And if this story does not suit him, you may, dear reader, tell him this one, which is likewise of a madman and a dog. In Cordova there was another madman, whose way it was to carry a piece of marble slab or a stone, not of the lightest, on his head, and when he came upon any unwary dog, he used to draw close to him and let the weight fall right on top of him, on which the dog, in a rage, barking and howling, would run 3 streets without stopping. It so happened, however, that one of the dogs he discharged his load upon was a cat-maker's dog, of which his master was very fond. The stone came down hitting it on the head. The dog raised a yell at the blow. The master saw the affair and was wroth, and snatching up a measure yard, rushed out at the madman and did not leave a sound bone in his body. And at every stroke he gave him, he said, "You dog, you thief, my lurcher! Don't you see, you brute, that my dog is a lurcher?" And so, repeating the word lurcher and again, he sent the madman away beaten to a jelly. The madman took the lesson to heart and vanished, and for more than a month never once showed himself in public. But after that he came out again with his old trick and a heavier load than ever. He came up to where there was a dog, and examining it very carefully without venturing to let the stone fall, he said, "This is a lurcher. Where?" In short, all the dogs he came across, be they mastiffs or terriers, he said were lurchers, and he discharged no more stones. Maybe it will be the same with this historian, that he will not venture another time to discharge the weight of his wit in books, which, being bad, are harder than stones. Tell him, too, that I do not care a farthing for the threat he holds out to me of depriving me of my profit by means of his book. For, to borrow from the famous interlude of the Peredenga, I say in answer to him, "Long life to my lord the 24, and Christ be with us all. Long life to the great Comte de la Mose, whose Christian charity and well-known generosity support me against all the strokes of my cursed fortune. And long life to the supreme benevolence of his eminence of Toledo, Don Bernardo de Sandoval y Rojas. And what matter if there are no printing presses in the world, or if they print more books against me than there are letters in the verses of Mingo Revogo? These 2 princes, unsought by any adulation or flattery of mine, of their own goodness alone, had taken it upon them to show me kindness and protect me, and in this I consider myself happier and richer than if fortune had raised me to her greatest height in the ordinary way. The poor man may retain honor, but not the fishes. Poverty may cast a cloud over nobility, but cannot hide it altogether. And as virtue of itself sheds a certain light, even though it be through the straits and chinks of penury, it wins the esteem of lofty and noble spirits, and in consequence their protection. Thou needst say no more to him, nor would I say anything more to thee, save to tell thee to bear in mind that this second part of Don Quixote which I offer thee is cut by the same craftsman and from the same cloth as the first, and that in it I present thee Don Quixote continued, and at length dead and buried, so that no one may dare to bring forward any further evidence against him, for that already produced is sufficient, and suffice it too, that some reputable person should have given an account of all these shrewd lunacies of his without going into the matter again, for abundance, even of good things, prevents them from being valued, and scarcity, even in the case of what is bad, confers a certain value. I was forgetting to tell thee that thou mayest expect the Perseus, which I am now finishing, and also the second part of Galatea.
好，呢個前言呢就讀到嚟呢度先。作者呢就用好簡潔嘅字呢交代咗幾件事。第一呢就係有一個冒充者就冒充當期我哋呢個作品啦，就推出咗第二部。咁呢就諗住趕喺呢個 Miguel de Cervantes 之前呢推出嘅。咁但係 Miguel de Cervantes 知道到呢件事呢，就立即呢就趕忙完成咗佢嘅 Part 2，係咪都推出咗？咁佢為此咧就借住呢個文章咧就話，相信大家都會以為我會大鬧特鬧噶啦。對於呢個冒充者，但我唔會嘅。雖然佢話係咁講，企咗道德高地，咁但係咧佢都借用咗兩個故事咧去影射呢個冒充者啦，即係話佢嘅瘋狂啊，佢嘅任性啊，佢哋嘅不可思議啊，借用咗兩個 madman 有兩個瘋狂嘅人，佢哋嘅行為。咁去影射啊，都唔係影射，就都幾明顯噶啦。咁喺到最尾咧，佢亦都多謝支持佢嘅人啦，兩位王子啊，廣大讀者啦咁樣。咁佢最後咧就話佢呢一個章節咧就係會結束呢個故事噶啦，講到明咧係會寫死Don Quixote呢個角色，而寫死佢嘅用意咧就係為咗以後唔會再有人去寫第3 part、第4 part、第5 part 啦，啲嘢同樣事情咧唔會再發生。好，我哋睇下呢啲字有啲咩字同大家分享先。Rectorship 嗰啲比較少用啊。Rector 係咩咧 ？Rector 咧即係一啲教區長啦，一啲教區嘅教長啦，或者一啲學校嘅校長。咁 rectorship 呢度嘅意思就係 the office or rank of a rector， 即係 rectorate。個名詞嚟嘅 vagaries vagaries 名詞嚟嘅 an unexpected and inexplicable change in a situation or in someone's behavior。 中文我會勉強翻譯做變幻啦，變幻無常啲成日都改變嘅嘢。Lurcher Lurcher 都係名詞 a crossbred dog。Typically, a retriever collie or sheepdog crossed with a greyhound, or a kind originally used for hunting and by poachers for catching rabbits. 一種狗啦，就係混種嘅用嚟追捕呢啲兔仔，我哋可以簡稱做獵犬嘅。好，今日讀到呢度，下一節再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。大家好。讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 讀到 Part 2第2部嘅第1節。咁呢一節嘅名叫做 Of the interview the curate and the barber had with Don Quixote about his malady。承接翻上一 part 嘅最後 ，Don Quixote 咧係要被送往去療養嘅，唔係淨係療傷，係療養。療養嘅咩咧？就係要改正佢呢個騎士精神。佢呢個遊俠嘅意識，咁Don Quixote本人當然係唔知情啦。咁但係咧呢個 curate 同埋爸爸咧就係確信咧Don Quixote咧個精神咧係有啲問題嘅， 上一回就交代咗作者對於佢嘅冒充 Don Quixote 嘅呢個虛假嘅作者所寫出嚟嘅嘢啦，亦都交代咗佢對呢件事嘅不齒啦，佢嘅寬宏大度啦，同埋就係佢對於原創呢樣嘢嘅一啲諗法。咁我再一次必須要表揚呢位作者喺一個咁遠久嘅年代，對於好多事情都好開通。當然佢可以再進一步做一啲喺文字上攻擊佢，咁但係實際上其實佢又做唔到啲乜嘅，即係當年係對於創作呢樣嘢係冇法例、冇執法，其實佢只能夠嬲嘅啫。咁但係嬲有咩用呢？ Anyway， 咁我哋睇下故事喺我哋嘅主角 Don Quixote佢療養嘅時候嘅一啲事情啦。
Cide Hamete Benengeli, in the second part of this history, and third sally of Don Quixote, says that the curate and the barber remained nearly a month without seeing him, lest they should recall or bring back to his recollection what had taken place. They did not, however, omit to visit his niece and housekeeper, and charged them to be careful to treat him with attention, and give him comforting things to eat, and such as were good for the heart and the brain, whence it was plain to see all his misfortune proceeded. The niece and housekeeper replied that they did so, and meant to do so with all possible care and assiduity, for they could perceive that their master was now and then beginning to show signs of being in his right mind. This gave great satisfaction to the curate and the barber, for they concluded they had taken the right course in carrying him off enchanted on the ox-cart, as has been described in the first part of its great as well as accurate history, in the last chapter thereof. So they resolved to pay him a visit, and test the improvement in his condition, although they thought it almost impossible that there could be any, and they agreed not to touch upon any point connected with knight-errantry, so as not to run the risk of reopening wounds which were still so tender. They came to see him consequently, and found him sitting up in bed in a green baize waistcoat and a red Toledo cap, and so withered and dried up that he looked as if he had been turned into a mummy. They were very cordially received by him. They asked him after his health, and he talked to them about himself very naturally and in very well-chosen language. In the course of their conversation, they fell to discussing what they call statecraft and systems of government, correcting this abuse and condemning that, reforming one practice and abolishing another, each of the three setting up for a new legislator a modern Lycurgus or a brand new Solon. And so completely did they remodel the state that they seemed to have thrust it into a furnace and taken out something quite different from what they had put in. And on all the subject they dealt with, Don Quixote spoke with such good sense that the pair of examiners were fully convinced that he was quite recovered and in his full senses. The niece and housekeeper were present at the conversation and could not find words enough to express their thanks to God at seeing their master so clear in his mind. The curate, however, changing his original plan, which was to avoid touching upon matters of chivalry, resolved to test Don Quixote's recovery thoroughly, and see whether it were genuine or not. And so, from one subject to another, he came at last to talk of the news that had come from the capital, and, among other things, he said it was considered certain that the Turk was coming down with a powerful fleet, and that no one knew what his purpose was, or when the great storm would burst, and that all Christendom was in apprehension of this, which almost every year calls us to arms, and that his Majesty had made provision for the security of the coasts of Naples and Sicily and the island of Malta. To this Don Quixote replied, His Majesty has acted like a prudent warrior in providing for the safety of his realms in time, so that the enemy may not find him unprepared. But if my advice were taken, I would recommend him to adopt a measure which at present, no doubt, His Majesty is very far from thinking of. The moment the curate heard this, he said to himself, God keep thee in his hand, poor Don Quixote, for it seemed to me thou art precipitating thyself from the height of thy madness into the profound abyss of thy simplicity. But the barber, who had the same suspicion as the curate, asked Don Quixote what would be his advice as to the measures that he said ought to be adopted, for perhaps it might prove to be one that would have to be added to the list of the many impertinent suggestions that people were in the habit of offering to princes. Mine, Master Shaver, said Don Quixote, will not be impertinent, but on the contrary, pertinent. I don't mean that, said the barber. but that experience has shown that all or most of the expedients which are proposed to His Majesty are either impossible or absurd or injurious to the king and to the kingdom. Mine, however, replied Don Quixote, is neither impossible nor absurd, but the easiest, the most reasonable, the readiest, and the most expeditious that could suggest itself to any projector's mind. You take a long time to tell it, Senor Don Quixote, said the curate. I don't choose to tell it here now, said Don Quixote, and have it reach the ears of the lords of the council tomorrow morning, and some other carry off the thanks and rewards of my trouble. For my part, said the barber, I give my word here and before God that I will not repeat what your worship says to king, rook, or earthly man, an oath I learnt from the ballad of the curate, who, in the prelude, told the king of the thief who had robbed him of the 100 gold crowns and his pacing mule. I'm not versed in stories, said Don Quixote, but I know the oath is a good one, because I know the barber to be an honest fellow. Even if he were not, said the curate, I will go bail and answer for him that in this matter he will be as silent as a dummy, under pain of paying any penalty that may be pronounced. And who will be security for you, Senor Curate? Said Don Quixote. My profession, replied the curate, which is to keep secrets. Oddsbody, said Don Quixote at this, what more has His Majesty to do but to command, by public proclamation, all the knights-errant that are scattered over Spain to assemble on a fixed day in the capital. For even if no more than half a dozen come, there may be one among them who alone will suffice to destroy the entire might of the Turk. Give me your attention and follow me. Is it, pray, any new thing for a single knight-errant to demolish an army of 200,000 men, as if they all had but one throat or were made of sugar paste? Nay, tell me, how many histories are there filled with these marvels? If any, the famous Don Belianis were alive now, or any one of the innumerable progeny of Amadis of Gaul. If any these were alive today, and were to come face to face with the Turk, by my faith, I would not give much for the Turk's chance, but God will have regard for His people, and will provide someone who, if not so valiant as the knights-errant of yore, at least will not be inferior to them in spirit. But God knows what I mean, and I say no more. Alas, exclaimed the niece at this, may I die if my master does not want to turn knight-errant again. To which Don Quixote replied, a knight-errant I shall die, and let the Turk come down or go up when he likes, and in as strong force as he can. Once more I say, God knows what I mean. But here the barber said, I ask your worships to give me leave to tell a short story of something that happened in Seville, which comes so pat to the purpose just now that I should like greatly to tell it. Don Quixote gave him leave, and the rest prepared to listen, and he began thus. In a madhouse at Seville there was a man whom his relations had placed there as being out of his mind. He was a graduate of Osuna in canon law, but even if he had been of Salamanca, it was the opinion of most people that he would have been mad all the same. This graduate, after some years of confinement, took it into his head that he was sane and in his full senses, and under this impression wrote to the Archbishop, entreating him earnestly, and in very correct language, to have him released from the misery in which he was living. For by God's mercy he had now recovered his lost reason, though his relations, in order to enjoy his property, kept him there, and, in spite of the truth, would make him out to be mad until his dying day. The Archbishop, moved by repeated sensible, well-written letters, directed one of his chaplains to make inquiry of the madhouse as to the truth of the licentiate's statements, and to have an interview with the madman himself, and, if it should appear that he was in his senses, to take him out and restore him to liberty. The chaplain did so, and the governor assured him that the man was still mad, and that though he often spoke like a highly intelligent person, he would in the end break out into nonsense that in quantity and quality counterbalanced all the sensible things he had said before, as might be easily tested by talking to him. The chaplain resolved to try the experiment, and obtaining access to the madman, conversed with him for an hour or more, during the whole of which time he never uttered a word that was incoherent or absurd, but, on the contrary, spoke so rationally that the chaplain was compelled to believe him to be sane. Among other things, he said the governor was against him, not to lose the presents his relations made him for reporting him still mad, but with lucid intervals, and that the worst foe he had in his misfortune was his large property. For in order to enjoy it, his enemies disparaged and threw doubts upon the mercy our Lord had shown him in turning him from the brute beast into a man. In short, he spoke in such a way that he cast suspicion on the governor, and made his relations appear covetous and heartless. and himself so rational that the chaplain determined to take him away with him that the archbishop might see him, and ascertain for himself the truth of the matter. Yielding to this conviction, the worthy chaplain begged the governor to have the clothes in which the licentiate had entered the house given to him. The governor again bade him beware of what he was doing, as the licentiate was beyond a doubt still mad. But all his cautions and warnings were unavailing to dissuade the chaplain from taking him away. The governor, seeing that it was the order of the archbishop, obeyed, and they dressed the licentiate in his own clothes, which were new and decent. He, as soon as he saw himself clothed like one in his senses and divested of the appearance of a madman, entreated the chaplain to permit him in charity to go and take leave of his comrades, the madmen. The chaplain said he would go with him to see what madmen there were in the house. So they went upstairs, and with them some of those who were present. Approaching a cage in which there was a furious madman, though just at the moment calm and quiet, the licentiate said to him, "Brother, think if you have any commands for me, for I am going home, as God has been pleased, in his infinite goodness and mercy, without any merit of mine, to restore me my reason. I am now cured and in my senses, for with God's power nothing is impossible. Have strong hope and trust in him, for as he has restored me to my original condition, so likewise he will restore you if you trust in him. I will take care to send you some good things to eat, and be sure you eat them. For I would have you know, I am convinced, as one who has gone through it, that all this madness of ours comes of having the stomach empty and the brains full of wind. Take courage, for despondency in misfortune breaks down health and brings on death." To all these words of the licentiate, another madman in the cage opposite that of the furious one was listening, and raising himself up from an old mat on which he lay stark naked, he asked in a loud voice who it was that was going away, cured and in his senses. The licentiate answered, "It is I, brother, who am going. I have now no need to remain here any longer, for which I return infinite thanks to heaven that has had so great mercy upon me." "Mind what you are saying, licentiate. Don't let the devil deceive you," replied the madman. "Keep quiet, stay where you are, and you will save yourself the trouble of coming back." "I know I am cured," returned the licentiate, "and that I shall not have to go stations again." "You cured?" said the madman. "Well, we shall see. God be with you. But I swear to you by Jupiter, whose majesty I represent on earth, that for this crime alone, which Seville is committing today in releasing you from this house, and treating you as if you were in your senses, I shall have to inflict such a punishment on it as will be remembered for ages and ages. Amen. Dost thou not know, thou miserable little licentiate, that I can do it, being, as I say, Jupiter the Thunderer, who hold in my hands the fiery bolts with which I am able and am wont to threaten and lay waste the world? But in one way only will I punish this ignorant town, and that is by not raining upon it, nor on any part of its district or territory, for 3 whole years, to be reckoned from the day and moment when this threat is pronounced. Thou free, thou cured, thou in thy senses, and I mad, I disordered, I bound. I will as soon think of sending rain as of hanging myself." Those present stood listening to the words and exclamations of the madman. But our licentiate, turning to the chaplain and seizing him by the hands, said to him, "Be not uneasy, signor. Attach no importance to what this madman has said. For if he is Jupiter and will not send rain, I, who am Neptune, the father and god of the waters, will rain as often as it pleases me and may be needful." The governor and the bystanders laughed, and at their laughter the chaplain was half ashamed, and he replied, "For all that, Signor Neptune, it will not do to vex Signor Jupiter. Remain where you are, and some other day, when there is a better opportunity and more time, we will come back for you." So they stripped the licentiate, and he was left where he was, and that's the end of the story. "So that's the story, Master Barber," said Don Quixote, "which came in so pat to the purpose that you could not help telling it? Master shaver, how blind is he who cannot see through a sieve? Is it possible that you do not know that comparisons of wit with wit, valor with valor, beauty with beauty, birth with birth, are always odious and unwelcome? I, Master Barber, am not Neptune, the god of waters, nor do I try to make anyone take me for an astute man, for I am not one. My only endeavor is to convince the world of the mistake it makes in not retrieving itself the happy time when the order of knight-errantry was in the field. But our depraved age does not deserve to enjoy such a blessing as those ages enjoyed with knights errant took upon their shoulders the defense of kingdoms and protection of damsels, the succor of orphans and minors, the chastisement of the proud, and the recompense of the humble. With the knights of these days, for the most part, it is a damask, brocade, and rich stuffs they wear, the rustle as they go, not the chain mail of their armor. No knight nowadays sleeps in an open field exposed to the inclemency of heaven, and in full panoply from head to foot. No one now takes a nap, as they call it, without drawing his feet out of the stirrups, and leaning upon his lance, as the knights errant used to do. No one now, issuing from the wood, penetrates yonder mountains, and then treads the barren, lonely shore of the sea, mostly a tempestuous and stormy one, and finding on the beach a little bark without oars, sail, mast, or tackling of any kind, in the intrepidity of his heart flings himself into it and commits himself to the wrathful billows of the deep sea, that one moment lift him up to heaven, and the next plunge him into the depths, and opposing his breast to the irresistible gale, finds himself, when he least expects it, 3,000 leagues and more away from the place where he embarked, and leaping ashore in the remote and unknown land has adventures that deserve to be written, not on parchment, but on brass. But now sloth triumphs over energy, indolence over exertion, vice over virtue, arrogance over courage, and theory over practice in arms, which flourished and shone only in the golden ages and in knights errant. For tell me, who was more virtuous and more valiant than the famous Amadis of Gaul? Who more discreet than Palmerin of England? Who more gracious and easy than Tirante el Blanco? Who more courtly than Lisuarte of Greece? Who more slashed or slashing than Don Belianis? Who more intrepid than Perion of Gaul? Who more ready to face danger than Felix Marte of Hircania? Who more sincere than Esplandian? Who more impetuous than Don Cirongilio of Thrace? Who more bold than Rodomonte? Who more prudent than King Sobrino? Who more daring than Reinaldos? Who more invincible than Roland? And who more gallant and courteous than Ruggiero? From whom the Dukes of Ferrara of the present day are descended, according to Turpin in his Cosmography. All these knights, and many more that I could name, Signor Curate, were knights errant, the light and glory of chivalry. These, of such as these, I would have to carry out my plan, and in that case my Majesty would find himself well served and would save great expense, and the Turk would be left tearing his beard. And so I will stay where I am, as the chaplain does not take me away, and if Jupiter, as the barber has told us, will not send rain, here I am, and I will reign when I please. I say this that Master Basin may know that I understand him. Indeed, Signor Don Quixote, said the barber, I did not mean it in that way, and so help me God, my intention was good, and your worship ought not to be vexed. As to whether I ought to be vexed or not, returned Don Quixote, I myself am the best judge. Hereupon the curate observed, I have hardly said a word as yet, and I would gladly be relieved of a doubt, arising from what Don Quixote has said, that worries and works my conscience. The Signor Curate has leave for more than that, returned Don Quixote, so he may declare his doubt, for it is not pleasant to have a doubt on one's conscience. Well then, with that permission, said the curate, I say my doubt is that all I can do, I cannot persuade myself that the whole pack of knights errant you, Signor Don Quixote, have mentioned, were really and truly persons of flesh and blood, that ever lived in the world. On the contrary, I suspect it to be all fiction, fable, and falsehood, and dreams told by men awakened from sleep, or rather still half asleep. That is another mistake, replied Don Quixote, into which many have fallen who do not believe that there ever were such knights in the world, and I have often, with divers people and on divers occasions, tried to expose this almost universal error to the light of truth. Sometimes I have not been successful in my purpose, sometimes I have, supporting it upon the shoulders of the truth, which truth is so clear that I can almost say I have with my own eyes seen Amadis of Gaul, who was a man of lofty stature, fair complexion, with a handsome though black beard, of a countenance between gentle and stern in expression, sparing of words, slow to anger, and quick to put it away from him. And as I have depicted Amadis, so I could, I think, portray and describe all the knights errant that are in all the histories in the world. for by the perception I have that they were what their histories describe, and by the deeds they did and the dispositions they displayed, it is possible, with the aid of sound philosophy, to deduce their features, complexion, and stature. How big, in your worship's opinion, may the giant Morgante have been, Signor Don Quixote? Asked the barber. With regard to giants, replied Don Quixote, opinions differ as to whether there ever were any or not in the world, but the Holy Scripture, which cannot err by a jot from the truth, shows us that there were, when it gives us the history of that big Philistine, Goliath, who was 7 cubits and a half in height, which is a huge size. Likewise, in the island of Sicily, there have been found leg bones and arm bones so large that their size makes it plain that their owners were giants, and as tall as great towers. Geometry puts this fact beyond a doubt, but for all that, I cannot speak with certainty as to the size of Morgante, though I suspect he cannot have been very tall, and I am inclined to be of this opinion because I find in history in which his deeds are particularly mentioned, that he frequently slept under a roof, and as he found houses to contain him, it is clear that his spout could not have been anything excessive. That is true, said the curate, and yielding to the enjoyment of hearing such nonsense, he asked him what was his notion of the features of Rinaldos of Montauban, and Don Rinaldo and the last of the 12 peers of France, for they were all knights errant. As for Rinaldos, replied Don Quixote, I venture to say that he was broad-faced, of ruddy complexion, with roguish and somewhat prominent eyes, excessively punctilious and touchy, and given to the society of thieves and scapegraces. With regard to Ronaldo and Rotolando and Orlando, I am of opinion and hold that he was of middle height, broad-shouldered, rather bow-legged, swarthy complexioned, red-bearded, with a hairy body and a severe expression of countenance, a man of few words, but very polite and well-bred. If Roland was not a more graceful person than your worship has described, said the curate, it is no wonder that the fair lady Angelica rejected him and left him for the gaiety, liveliness, and grace of that budding bearded little Moor to whom she surrendered herself, and she showed her sense in falling in love with the gentle softness of Medoro rather than the roughness of Roland. That Angelica, Signor Curate, returned Don Quixote, was a giddy damsel, flighty and somewhat wanton, and she left the world as full of her vagaries as of the fame of her beauty. She treated with scorn 1,000 gentlemen, men of valour and wisdom, and took up with a smooth-faced sprig of page, without fortune or fame, except such reputation for gratitude as the affection he bore his friend got for him. The great poet who sang her beauty, the famous Ariosto, not caring to sing her adventures after her contemptible surrender, dropped her where he says, how she received the sceptre of Cathay, some bard of defter quill may sing some day. And this was no doubt a kind of prophecy, for poets are also called fates, that is to say diviners, and its truth was made plain, for since then a famous Andalusian poet has lamented and sung her tears, and another famous and rare poet, a Castilian, has sung her beauty. Tell me, Signor Don Quixote, said the barber here, among all those who praised her, has there been no poet to write a satire on this Lady Angelica? I can well believe, replied Don Quixote, that if Sacripante or Roland had been poets, they would have given the damsel a trimming, for it is naturally the way with poets who have been scorned or rejected by the ladies, whether fictitious or not, in short, by those whom they select as the ladies of their thoughts, to avenge themselves in satires and libels, a vengeance, to be sure, unworthy of generous hearts. But up to the present I have not heard of any defamatory verse against the Lady Angelica, who turned the world upside down. Strange, said the curate, but at this moment they heard the housekeeper and the niece, who had previously withdrawn from the conversation, exclaiming aloud in the courtyard, and at the noise they all ran out.
好，第一節讀完啦。咁呢一節就用咗一啲功夫去交代咗啲劇情，就係當Quixote喺佢嘅鄉下療養嘅時候，祭司咧同埋呢個理髮師咧都冇去揾佢嚇，過咗成個月，就係唔想勾起佢嘅一啲回憶啦。到1個月之後啦，就嚟探訪佢，睇下佢有冇好返。咁佢哋原本嘅交談內容咧都盡量唔提有關遊俠嘅嘢，但係由於當Quixote嘅表現實在太好啦。佢講嘅有關正事啊，有關日常嘅嘢，全部都對答如流。 咁啊令到咧呢個牧師咧就決定去同佢講有關遊俠嘅內容。咁而當基多提咧依然都係堅持佢嘅諗法，而佢嘅講法咧今次咧就更加客觀、更加精勁嘅。佢就係話佢只不過係想將遊俠精神帶翻嚟呢個國家、呢個土地，係因為佢覺得呢個精神咧係會為國家嘅國民帶嚟好處，包括我哋嘅國王對於我哋嘅軍事，對於我哋守護我哋嘅國土，就唔需要懼怕呢啲土耳其嘅入侵者。呢個騎士精神咧係對國民咧係有一個增強啦，一個帶嚟榮耀啦，帶嚟勇敢啦、果斷啦各種嘅好處。佢只係想為國家帶嚟、為國民帶嚟啲精神啫，佢係冇其他含義喺度嘅，冇其他淺別嘅含義喺度。咁去到最後啦，當基多提都會表現出佢哋喺對話當中將佢同其他精神病者掛鈎，佢覺得有啲不似啊，有啲不滿啊咁樣。咁成個對話其實表現出當基多提咧，的確係神志清醒喎，佢係冇問題嘅，佢只不過係有啲遊俠意識嘅狂熱啫咁樣。好，我哋睇下呢一段有啲咩字同大家分享。Pertinent, P-E-R-T-I-N-E-N-T 形容詞嚟嘅 relevant or applicable to a particular matter, apposite 呢個係恰當嘅意思，有關聯嘅恰當嘅。之前有同大家分享過 impertinent 咧，嗰個就係無禮嘅，唔恰當嘅。pertinent 咧就係正面嘅。despondency, D-E-S-P-O-N-D-E-N-C-Y 名詞嚟嘅 low spirits from loss of hope or courage, dejection 沮喪、消沉沮喪。odious, O-D-I-O-U-S 形容詞嚟嘅，意思就係好可惡、好可憎 extremely unpleasant, repulsive。好，呢一節同大家分享嚟呢度，下一節再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽2.0，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 讀到 Part 2嘅 Chapter II。呢一節嘅名叫做 Which treats of notable altercation which Sancho Panza had with Don Quixote's niece and housekeeper together with other droll matters。呢度 droll matters 意思即係啲滑稽嘅事情啦，我哋可以當係一啲輕鬆嘅事件啊，唔係太嚴重嘅事吓，唔係太嚴重嘅事。咁啊，畢竟都係故事開首。咁上一回就講咧呢個牧師啦，同埋呢個髮型師、理髮師就去探訪唐吉訶德療養中嘅唐吉訶德，時間已經經過1個月噶啦。咁咧就佢哋由探病啦，到交談啦，講啲不着邊際嘢啦，到最尾都係要針對翻唐吉訶德對於遊俠呢個精神世界嘅一啲思想。咁佢哋就展開咗一啲辯論，係有建設性嘅，我可以咁講，唔係無謂，唔係無聊嘅，係令到讀者咧都可以帶俾思考嘅。咁去到最後咧，當呢個辯論去到一個高位嘅時候咧，可以咁講啦，當基多提嘅抗辯咧係都幾有力嘅時候咧，就聽到屋出邊咧就傳來咗一啲聲音喎，似乎咧有啲係咪有啲事件發生咧，有啲爭執咁咧？睇下眾人咧點樣去處理呢件事啊。
The history relates that the outcry Don Quixote, the curate and the barber, heard came from the niece and the housekeeper exclaiming to Sancho, who was striving to force his way in to see Don Quixote while they held the door against him. What does the vagabond want in this house? Be off to your own, brother, for it is you and no one else that delude my master and lead him astray and take him tramping about the country. To which Sancho replied, Devil's own housekeeper, it is I who am deluded and led astray and taken tramping about the country, and not thy master. He has carried me all over the world, and you are mightily mistaken. He enticed me away from home by a trick, promising me an island, which I am still waiting for. May evil islands choke thee, thou detestable Sancho, said the niece. What are islands? Is it something to eat, glutton and gourmandizer that thou art? "It is not something to eat," replied Sancho, "but something to govern and rule, and better than 4 cities or 4 judgeships at court." "For all that," said the housekeeper, "you don't enter here. You bag of mischief and sack of knavery. Go govern your house and dig your seed patch, and give over looking for islands or shylands." The curate and the barber listened with great amusement to the words of the 3, but Don Quixote, uneasy lest Sancho should blab and blurt out a whole heap of mischievous stupidities, and touch upon points that might not be altogether to his credit, called to him and made the other 2 hold their tongues and let him come in. Sancho entered, and the curate and the barber took their leave of Don Quixote, of whose recovery they despaired when they saw how wedded he was to his crazy ideas, and how saturated with the nonsense of his unlucky chivalry, and said the curate to the barber, "You will see, gossip, that when we are less thinking of it, our gentleman will be off once more for another flight." "I have no doubt of it," returned the barber, "but I do not wonder so much at the madness of the knight as at the simplicity of the squire, who has such a firm belief in all that about the island, that I suppose all the exposures that could be imagined would not get it out of his head." "God help them," said the curate, "and let us be on the lookout to see what comes of all these absurdities of the knight and squire, for it seems as if they had both been cast in the same mould, and the madness of the master without the simplicity of the man would not be worth a farthing." "That is true," said the barber, "and I should like very much to know what the pair are talking about at this moment." "I promise you," said the curate, "the niece of the housekeeper will tell us by and by, for they are not the ones to forget to listen." Meanwhile, Don Quixote shut himself up in his room with Sancho, and when they were alone, he said to him, "It grieves me greatly, Sancho, that thou shouldst have said and sayest that I took thee out of thy cottage, when thou knowest I did not remain in my house. We sallied forth together, we took the road together, we wandered abroad together, and we have had the same fortune and the same luck. If they blanketed thee once, they belabored me 100 times, and that is the only advantage I have of thee." "That was only reasonable," replied Sancho, "for, by what your worship says, misfortunes belong more properly to knights errant than to their squires." "Thou art mistaken, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "According to when the head aches, all the members ache, etc." "I don't understand any language but my own," said Sancho. "I mean to say," said Don Quixote, "that when the head suffers, all the members suffer. And so, being thy lord and master, I am thy head, and thou art part of me as thou art my servant, and therefore any evil that affects or shall affect me should give thee pain, and what affects thee give pain to me." "It should be so," said Sancho, "but when I was blanketed as a member, my head was on the other side of the wall, looking on while I was flying through the air, and did not feel any pain whatever. And if the members are obliged to feel the suffering of the head, it should be obliged to feel their sufferings." "Dost thou mean to say now, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "that I did not feel when they were blanketing thee? If thou dost, thou must not say so or think so, for I felt more pain then in spirit than thou didst in body. But let us put that aside for the present, for we shall have opportunities enough for considering and settling the point. Tell me, Sancho, my friend, what do they say about me in the village here? What do the common people think of me? What do the hidalgos? What do the caballeros? What do they say of my valor, of my achievements, of my courtesy? How do they treat the task I have undertaken in reviving and restoring to the world the now forgotten order of chivalry? In short, Sancho, I should have thee tell me all that has come to thine ears on this subject, and thou art to tell me, without adding anything to the good or taking away anything from the bad, for it is the duty of loyal vassals to tell the truth to their lords, just as it is and in its proper shape, not allowing flattery to add to it or any idle deference to lessen it. And I would have thee know, Sancho, that if the naked truth, undisguised by flattery, came to the ears of princes, times would be different, and other ages would be reckoned iron ages more than ours, which I hold to be the golden of these latter days. Profit by this advice, Sancho, and report to me clearly and faithfully the truth of what thou knowest touching what I have demanded of thee." "That I will do with all my heart, master," replied Sancho, "provided your worship will not be vexed at what I say, as you wish me to say it out in all its nakedness, without putting any more clothes on it than it came to my knowledge in." "I will not be vexed at all," returned Don Quixote. "Thou mayest speak freely, Sancho, and without any beating about the bush." "Well then," said he, "first of all, I have to tell you that the common people consider your worship a mighty great madman, and me no less a fool. The hidalgos say that, not keeping within the bounds of your quality of gentleman, you have assumed the don and made a knight of yourself at a jump, with 4 fine stocks and a couple of acres of land, and never a shirt to your back. The caballeros say they do not want to have hidalgos setting up in opposition to them, particularly squire hidalgos who polish their own shoes and darn their black stockings with green silk. That, said Don Quixote, does not apply to me, for I always go well-dressed and never patched. Ragged I may be, but ragged more from the wear and tear of arms than of time. As to your worship's valour, courtesy, accomplishments, and tasks, there is a variety of opinions. Some say mad but droll, others valiant but unlucky, others courteous but meddling, and then they go into such a number of things that they don't leave a whole bone either in your worship or in myself. Recollect, Sancho, said Don Quixote, that wherever virtue exists in an eminent degree, it is persecuted. Few or none of the famous men that have lived escape being calumniated by malice. Julius Caesar, the boldest, wisest, the bravest of captains, was charged with being ambitious, and not particularly cleanly in his dress, or pure in his morals. Of Alexander, whose deeds won him the name of great, they say that he was somewhat of a drunkard. Of Hercules, him of the many labours, it is said that he was lewd and luxurious. Of Don Galaor, the brother of Amadis of Gaul, it was whispered that he was over-quarrelsome, and of his brother that he was lachrymose. So that, O Sancho, amongst all these calumnies against good men, mine may be let pass, since they are no more than thou hast said. That's just where it is, body of my father. Is there more then? Asked Don Quixote. There's a tail to be skinned yet, said Sancho. All so far is cakes and fancy bread, but if your worship wants to know all about the calumnies they bring against you, I will fetch you one this instant who can tell you the whole of them without missing an atom. For last night the son of Bartolomeo Carrasco, who has been studying at Salamanca, came home after having been made a bachelor, and when I went to welcome him, he told me that your worship's history is already abroad in books, with the title of The Ingenious Gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha. And they says they mention me in it by my own name of Sancho Panza, and the lady Dulcinea El Toboso too, and divers things that happened to us when we were alone, so that I crossed myself in my wonder how the historian who wrote them down could have known them. I promise thee, Sancho, said Don Quixote, the author of our history will be some sage enchanter, or to such nothing that they choose to write about is hidden. What? Said Sancho. A sage and an enchanter? Why, the bachelor Samson Carrasco says the author of the history is called Cide Hamete Benengeli. That is a Moorish name, said Don Quixote. Maybe so, replied Sancho, for I have heard say that the Moors are mostly great lovers of Berengenes. Thou must have mistaken the surname of this Cide, which means in Arabic Lord, Sancho, observed Don Quixote. Very likely, replied Sancho, but if your worship wishes me to fetch the bachelor, I will go for him in a twinkling. Thou wilt do me a great pleasure, my friend, said Don Quixote, for what thou hast told me has amazed me, and I shall not eat a morsel that will agree with me until I have heard all about it. Then I'm off for him, said Sancho, and leaving his master he went in quest of the bachelor, with whom he returned in a short time, and all three together they had a very droll colloquy.
好，呢一節讀到呢一度，解釋咗先前呢，當叫我哋聽到門外嘅噪音呢，原來就係 Sancho Panza 佢想入嚟探訪佢，不過呢，佢自己嘅 housekeeper 呢，同埋佢侄女呢，就阻止佢入嚟，因為佢哋就怪係 Sancho 去迷惑當叫我哋，令到佢呢走去遊俠。咁 Sancho 啊當然就即時嘅反對啦，就係話調翻轉喎，好似係我俾人迷惑喎。仲俾人呃咗話會俾個島我喎，然之後對方又會話咩係個島啊咁樣，咁啊呢啲比較滑稽啦，可以話啲搞笑啲嘅對話啦。咁入到嚟之後咧，牧師同理髮師咧都先離場啦，就俾 Sancho 同 Don Quixote 兩個就獨自去做一個對話啦，呢啲深入啲嘅對話啦。Don Quixote咧就率先發話啦，就係話：哎呀，我好唔開心啊！頭先聽到你喺門外面咁講話係我迷惑你，但係你冇發覺咩？每一次出事嘅時候，我都俾你傷好多㗎。咁 Sancho 就話：咁係應該嘅喎，因為你話騎士精神，嗰個騎士要受嘅苦難係要比佢嘅侍從多好多㗎嘛。有啲爭辯啊。 當吉訶德就話，其實我好想知道村入面嘅人係點樣諗佢嘅嗰啲鄉紳啊，嗰啲比較有地位嘅人啊，點樣去睇佢呢個遊俠精神啊？點樣去睇佢自己 ？Sancho 就隨隨道來啦，就係有好壞參半啊。咁但係其實咧，仲有好多唔好嘅嘢嘅，呢一刻都未完全講晒出嚟。佢話不過咧 ，Sancho 就話啦最近咧就有一個人，佢咧就喺村出面翻嚟嘅。咁佢咧就啱啱咧做咗個學者，咁佢咧就同我哋講，原來你喺出邊好有名噶，咁咧仲有一個尊稱咁啦，連佢自己Sancho 嘅自己連帶都出咗名，外面嘅人都知道佢嘅姓名。當然仲有就係當吉訶德所謂嘅情人Dulcinea El Toboso啦。咁於是乎當吉訶德就好開心啦，不如你快邀請佢入嚟啊！我想知道點解出邊嘅人會咁清楚我哋嘅事跡，究竟係邊個喺度宣傳宣揚緊佢哋嘅事咧？咁樣Sancho就話冇問題，我即刻帶佢入嚟，跟住轉頭咧就帶佢入嚟啦。然之後咧三個人咧又會有繼續一個好滑稽嘅對話啦。好，呢一節同大家分享幾個字 altercation 呢個係個文中主題嗰度呢一節嘅主題就有噶啦 altercation altercation 名詞嚟嘅 ，a noisy argument or disagreement, especially in public， 喺公眾場所嘅爭吵啦。eminent E-M-I-N-E-N-T 形容詞嚟嘅。如果形容一個人嘅話咧，就係 famous and respected within a particular sphere， 都係有名啦、顯赫啦。如果係 quality 咧，即係個能力咧，都係類似嘅。present to a notable degree 都係一個好超然嘅、好卓越嘅咁嘅意思。咁故事文中咧就當吉訶德就話：乜你冇發覺任何一個人當佢嘅成就係去到一個 eminent 嘅 degree 咧，佢就會受到迫害例如 Julius Caesar， 例如 Alexander the Great 咁樣。呢個就係當吉訶德嘅抗辯啊。calumniate C-A-L-U-M-N-I-A-T-E 動詞嚟嘅 make false and defamatory statements about 毀謗、中傷、污蔑，好唔好嘅字？咁呢個亦都係當吉訶德話啦，就係即係我哋呢啲做大事嘅，就係會俾人污蔑 calumniate 噶啦。好，我哋下一次再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。